Hello and welcome to Shape the System, where we find and tell the stories that help people to rethink the way the world works. We interview people from all over the world who are helping to change our systems for the better. Shape the System is an independent podcast with support from KPMG High Growth Ventures, who help ambitious founders and their teams scale up for success. More about KPMG High Growth Ventures after the interview. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the show. Well, it might not be morning, I don't know where you are, but we're going to be talking today to a doctor. I don't think we've ever had a doctor on the show in any capacity, so Dr. Berry is going to be talking to us about all things STEM and technology and learning, and it's actually a topic we haven't covered that much on the show, and so I'm excited from it. I've got a background in technology, so I'm obviously very interested in understanding that. I also have a role as a father of a child who's growing up in a world that has a lot of ambiguity. So there's just so much to cover and unpack in this show. So firstly, Dr. Berry, welcome to the show, and maybe just introduce yourself, a little bit about where you're coming from, how you came to be working on this challenge, and then we'll dive into the normal show format.
Excellent. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I really appreciate you, Vincent. It's really great to know that, we talked earlier about the fact that I'm in San Diego, California, and your hometown of Perth in Australia is the most similar climate and energy and atmosphere to San Diego. So I think we're kindred spirits right out of the gate. So thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Yeah. So again, my name is Dr. Jennifer Berry. I'm very happy to be here. I'm the CEO of an organization called SmartLab. SmartLab is an organization where we have an integrated ecosystem that sparks aha moments and builds STEM identity for learners. And we focus on the K-12 space. So we work with students in the K-12 space to ensure that they get their STEM identity. We define STEM identity as a learner's self-belief that they belong, they can master rigorous challenges, and their ideas have an impact. So a lot of people think of STEM as science, technology, engineering, and math. And we've really codified this, this definition about STEM identity is beyond the STEM fields and really about a feeling, an inner feeling, an identity that you take on, that you belong, you can master rigorous challenges, and your ideas have an impact. And what we found is that in every industry, when these students leave the K-12 space and go into their post-secondary or into careers, that every industry, especially now in this AI-powered world, uses STEM applications. And when you use STEM applications in every career, you don't have to be in the STEM fields. You can actually be in any field, your field, my field. You can be in any field and still thrive if you have this identity that you belong there, that you can master challenges, and that your ideas add value and have impact.
Wonderful. So there's going to be a lot to unpack there. And I want to come back a step just on two things. Firstly, just how you arrived to be working in this space and with the company specifically. And then I also want to understand the status of, maybe STEM's the wrong word, but the types of skill sets and the types of identity that you're referring to. Like, what does that look like and K-12 is a term that anyone in the US understands, but it essentially means kindy through to year 12. It means high school and primary school and the bit before, for anyone who's not coming from the US. So just help me understand your background, how you became, and then what this looks like today without SmartLab.
Yeah, I'll actually start with the fact that I was the type of learner as a kid that needed to move and learn. So I ended up becoming a professional dancer years later, but I needed to move in order to learn. I couldn't sit still in my chair. I couldn't just sit and listen to instruction and retain it. I needed to move. I needed to get up and apply the skills that I was learning in order for it to really stick in my brain. So I feel like early in my life, I really resonated towards more a kinesthetic learning style, a more movement-based learning style where I needed things to touch and feel things and to actually have hands-on project-based learning environments in order to thrive in my early years. So I feel like that was an early aha for me. My mom put me in Montessori schools. Montessori schools in the US are these schools where it's like play-based learning. and you sort of go based on, and you play and you learn and you level up based on your own unique desires and needs and abilities. And I really thrived in that sort of play-based learning environment when I was young. And so I've always been attracted to this hands-on learning approach versus sort of the sit-down traditional read-write learning style. So I feel like I've always leaned into different aspects of career choices. And especially as I entered into the education space, I really feel like I leaned into educational environments that created more energy for kids, where they got up out of their seat and they had a more project-based environment. So, after my professional dancing career, I moved into the retail space actually. And from there, I learned all of the basics of customer service skills and marketing skills and sales skills and really basic operation skills. And I was early in my career recruited into the education space. And from there, I really chose and was very deliberate in the choices that I made for the education organizations that I joined, that were supplemental to the basic everyday learning that students were getting, or within the learning environment that the students were in, it was more of a unique and innovative learning approach for the students. So everything from supplemental tutoring to after school programs where students could really thrive and grow and learn outside of the traditional classroom settings, to the special education space, really working with students that maybe had neurodiversities and they needed to really learn in a different way. I feel like all of those experiences led me to SmartLab, and SmartLab has a full integrated ecosystem that is hands-on project-based learning that we put into classrooms. So it's sort of like the perfect mix between everything that I started with as a young child and all of the experiences that led me up to this. When the recruiter called me and said, "Hey, we have this amazing opportunity for you to interview to be the CEO of this STEM learning company," I jumped at the chance because it sort of was a perfect amalgamation of all of the experiences that I've ever had, and really got me excited about getting students to learn in a project-based hands-on way. So it was a
Yeah.
perfect mix. Yeah.
And it's funny, like, as you were saying that, all I could think was the recruiter must have been overjoyed. They're like, "Oh my God, I have the perfect person," like on so many levels, not just the skill level and the arc of the experience and where she's at in her career, but like in her soul, this is like she was built for this role. That's
Yeah, I
amazing.
appreciate that. I appreciate that. Maybe they did. I hope they did. Obviously, they hired me, so that's a good thing. The organization hired me, but more importantly, I think that's right. Like, I really am passionate about what the students get out of this experience that we deliver to them. In fact, I was just at a ribbon cutting for a school up in Oakland, California. Just yesterday. And to witness the students engaged in the lab and testing things out. There was this one young boy who left the lab and took a drone and was working the drone out in the yard of the school. And not only was he having fun showing us how he was having the drone fly around and how it was being utilized, he then was having conversations about the type of career. And this was a middle school child, so he's in seventh grade, so grade 7 in out there in the world. And he was having conversations about what type of career he could have using drones. So it wasn't just that he got to play with this drone. He's seventh grade, which is 13 years old. He was also saying, "Oh, I could use drones for taking photos at a football stadium. I could use drones for going onto a beach and identifying maybe a missing child from their parent. I could use drones." So he was really starting to see how this fun thing that he was getting to play with and fly around in the schoolyard was also connected to a career. That, for me, is what it's all about. When we can have those aha moments for kids where they're not just going, "Oh, that was fun. I was able to figure out how to get the drone up and off the ground and flying around." And that in and of itself is a good skill to learn, but that's just the application part. What about what you could do with that in an industry, what you could do with that in a career? And to hear a 13-year-old talking to like that just filled my spirit, because to me, this is a student that maybe would never have otherwise even known that could be a career for him. And to be honest, he was probably inventing careers or even jobs or even an industry, that doesn't even exist yet, by knowing how to use this piece of technology. So that to me was very exciting. And, when I think about what we do here at SmartLab, obviously as a CEO, I need to understand the P&L, and I need to understand, our EBITDA, and I need to understand, my sales team and how are they functioning and all our conference strategy and all of that. But that to me is secondary to what is the impact that the students are getting from what we're delivering to them. And that student that I got to see yesterday was the exact example of the impact we can make. He learned a skill.
Yeah.
He was excited about showing it off. And he was connecting it to real world problems and real world solutions that he could take into his future. So that was really inspiring. And to me, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, wonderful. And I want to get into some more of that detail because I think there's a duality here of at a macro level, what's the type of impact that can happen, but at a personal story level, you can almost elevate the stories to say this is exactly what we're talking about. But I want to push up.
Yeah.
I want to get to that by pushing up firstly with what is the status of the world today in
Mm-hmm.
kind of K-12 in the US in schools with respect to, and I'm going to make air quotes when I say it, STEM, but I mean the space in which you play. Like, how does the world look today? That school in Oakland that you cut the ribbon, 6 months ago, what did it look like? How did it approach this at all? Like, and what's the problem with that? Let's understand that first.
Yeah, I think it's a really great question. I think all K-12 or K through 12 schools in America currently right now are grappling with this question about what is next for future learning for kids, mainly because of the generative AI, the speed in which AI is learning from itself and the speed in which AI is replicating things that otherwise would have been taught to students to know how to do. And so I think what's happening now is superintendents of school districts are really trying to make sure that there's equity across all kids in the United States, that they're all getting exposed to similar learning assets, but also they're trying to figure out what exactly are we teaching our students right now. We know the basics. They have to know how to read. They have to be at particular literacy levels. They need to be at particular math levels, right? Reach particular thresholds in the math environment, and then all the basic stuff, the history, the social sciences and whatnot. But what else? Like, what is really going to set them up for success, especially now that the reality is AI is going to do a lot of the things that post-secondary teaches kids how to do, right? And they are not necessarily going to have to learn how to do that anymore. So I'm excited right now that the U.S. is grappling with this conversation, and superintendents and educators are really digging deep as to what do we need to put in front of kids to set them up for life. And in many cases, the superintendents, the educators, don't even know what that life outside of, in 5 to 10 years is going to look like for kids because of the speed in which AI is moving, right? There's always been technological advancements in this country and across the world. There's always been that. But AI is speeding that up. And I would offer that it's going to be an AI powered world in, a matter of minutes, right? If it isn't already an AI powered world. And so that school 6 months ago in Oakland was doing the basics, right? Teaching them math, teaching them writing, teaching them reading, really making sure that those students were set up for success with the basics that we've been teaching kids for 50, 60, 70, 80 years, right? Like the good old red schoolhouses out in the farms. That's what they were teaching. That's really probably 6 months ago what was happening. I do happen to know this particular school was doing some innovative things with kids, trying to get them to collaborate in different unique ways, and really try to get exposure to things that maybe they might not otherwise get exposed to in the community that they're in. But they weren't really setting them up for connective tissue to what careers could look like. So the exposure to these STEM applications with connection to industries and career or even problems that are in particular careers is really the differentiator between 6 months ago and what they have now with the SmartLab. So I would offer that many schools are grappling with this and trying to figure out what do we need to put in front of kids to get them excited about what their future could be, to get their discernment to be at a very high level so that they can understand when AI spits out something that they don't just take that as the first answer, but that they could ask some more questions. They could maybe ask it a different way. They could ask to cite the sources that information came from. They could maybe layer on a prompt so that answer gets more robust and deep, rather than it just powering the student, the AI powering the student. Instead, the student is powering the AI, and the prompts and the questions that occur, or that they're asking AI in order to solve their problems. So I would offer that it's a problem right now, in the sense that everybody is grappling with, how do we match the speed in which AI is moving, right? School districts in the US are probably some of the slowest, I don't want to call them antiquated, but maybe that's a good word, antiquated businesses out there, because they are big, huge infrastructures that have tons of kids, and they have to create standards to hold all students accountable to. And when AI is messing with that, when the speed of learning is messing with that, school districts are starting to look at themselves in the face and saying, ooh, we're too slow. We need to move a little faster. We need to move our practices up and really think about, what are we putting in front of students that is going to engage them in real world careers now, rather than waiting for them to get into college to figure that out, right? Like, schools need to think about that when the kids are preschool, kindergarten, right? Exposing them to potential careers and problems really early on. Like you talked about, that you have a young 7-year-old, right? Exposing your 7-year-old to things and having conversations about what that looks like in a real industry could be really useful, just in the home, but also in the schools. So I would say that's probably the biggest problem, and specifically the US, is the speed in which things are happening. That doesn't always match how school districts function in the United States. And so everybody is grappling with, how do we match the speed in which things are changing? And that's going to take a lot of innovation and creativity, and people willing to do things differently.
Yeah, and I mean, when I sort of think about, and you rightly brought up, as someone, I've been around technology, and I listen to a lot, and I read a lot about this, and I try to understand the arc of history. And AI is different, and it's not different. Yes, it's new technology, but it's technology that thinks. So, and AI is only part of the picture, right? The example you gave with drones, there's probably AI involved in that dialogue, but it is also
Oh,
just
yeah.
another tool in the larger picture. But if I think about kind of, I mean, I would suggest that, because of having spent this long around this stuff and spent a lot of time thinking about it and reading about it and trying to learn as much, even I'm not sure what type of dialogue and relationship to have with my 7-year-old, albeit like someone who's got to make a decision for 500 7-year olds or thereabouts.
Yeah.
And so for me, I feel like if I was running a school, I would be so unsure of the thing I should be doing. And
Yeah.
that must vary across schools. But I mean, how many people who have spent, 2 decades in technology, in and around thinking about the future of technology, are inside of schools making decisions about what is best for a child to be learning, to lean in, to have to be pushed even in the right direction? That feels to me like
Yeah.
such an overwhelming challenge.
Such an overwhelming challenge. You know what I've seen, where I've seen the biggest success in this? And I can speak. I have 11-year-old, so not too far off from your child. And I'm leaning in, and I run a STEM company, and I'm around technology. I'm reading technology stuff is at the rapid pace that you're probably reading it, maybe even more so, because I run a STEM company. And I'm leaning less to teaching her about the technology and the tools and the this and the that, and more into being a very strong communicator, a very strong collaborator, high on the empathetic scale, like really leaning into celebrating her empathy, really leaning into having her ask questions, have that deep level of
Right,
discernment that
critical
I
thinking.
spoke about earlier. I'm actually leaning harder into some of the, what they used to call soft skills, right? Even harder into that, because I want her to be a systems thinker. I want her to be a computational thinker. I want her to be able to collaborate at very high levels. I want her to be able to communicate in ways that are above just staring at a text and writing a couple of texts to her, back and forth to her friends. That's really important to me, is to really lean into the soft skills, if you will. And I'm doing that in air quotes as well.
I know. It's all right. This goes
Yeah.
out on video too, so don't worry. The air
Yeah,
quotes will be there.
absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's important even more so now, because if you think about it, you and I didn't grow up with, I mean, AI has been around forever, to your point. This is not like, I don't know about forever, but at least the last, 30 years. This is not new. It's just happening at such a rapid pace now, and everybody's talking about it. It's like but the reality is, I'm sure if you have a son, right? Your son, I can speak for my daughter. Uh, it's sort of second nature to them, right? Like she talks to Google, hey Google, and asks a bunch of questions. Like it's just like part of, she goes straight to. She doesn't have a phone. She uses my phone if she needs to, but she'll immediately know exactly what to do. I've never taught her that. She's never taken a class on that, right? It's they're digital natives. Right? We weren't digital natives. We had to like learn that stuff. But she's a digital native. She's going to be an AI native. That's going to be natural to her. So instead of over functioning and trying to make sure, how do we teach kids how to use AI and write the right prompts? And how do we teach them how to use all these technical aspects? We need to expose them to those things. That student at that ribbon cutting yesterday needed to be exposed to working a drone, but not because he wouldn't have naturally been able to pick up a drone. What he needed to think about was, and I was really impressed, he was able to communicate at 13, and that's a really hard age to talk to adults. He was able to communicate while he was sitting there flying this around what he was doing. He was able to look us in the eye and tell us, let me tell you how I got this thing from here to there. And let me tell you what kind of thing it's going to do in the future. So that communication skill that he had was really powerful. And clearly the school is setting him up for success in that. Also, his parents probably were, the community was, but also this environment that we gave him, this opportunity to get out of the classroom, get into learning something, get something up in the air, and then have an adult come and say, what are you doing? And he was able to communicate with us. That to me, if I was to give you advice as a parent, I give myself this advice every day. I try to not overthink, like, how do I need to teach her all these STEM applications? Do I need to make sure she's exposed to how to use all these 75 different AI tools that you can use for all of these all of these choices that you can make? I'm really over functioning on and over indexing on teaching her all of the C words: collaboration, critical thinking, communication, and then really thinking about how to be a systems thinker, and also being okay with failure. And I think that's what STEM does for kids when they get STEM learning environments. Usually in our world, we give them a problem that they have to solve, then we give them a STEM application to solve it. But we don't tell them much else. They need to figure out, like, okay, how do I take this STEM application and solve this problem? Right? That's powerful, because now they have to think about, first of all, I have to technically think about how to get this STEM application to work. And now I have to think about how to get it to work for this problem, to solve this problem. And now I need to tell people about it. Right? Now I need to communicate with others what I did, how many times I failed doing that. I tried something, it didn't work. I tried something again, it didn't work. I mean, that's the biggest learnings in my life. And I'm sure if you can think back in yours, is when we actually screwed up. Right? Like I think about my life all the time. I'm screwing up or failing, or that didn't work, or I tried that. I had this idea. I tried that out. That didn't work. That's actually where I get the biggest learnings and where the most success for me comes from. And so giving those students that opportunity to fail a lot through these STEM applications and these problems they're trying to solve, I think is really the key ingredient. And I'm less thinking about the STEM application itself, because I believe my daughter is going to figure out how to use that stuff way faster than I'll ever learn. Right? She'll be able to
it's
be
the
like,
context around it.
yeah, they just know it's native to them. They're just like, okay, just did a. But what I want her to think about is the process by which she got that problem solved, and all the failure along the way to get the problem solved, and how she was able to communicate that to others, and how she was able to really systems think in order to get there. That to me is the most important skills that we can teach kids right now.
Yeah.
And I
Is
think
there a fundamental
go for
I
it.
was going to say, is there a fundamental like learning aspect here? And I'm going to relay an interaction I had with my 7-year-old, where I said, "Look, hey, I think he had my phone for some reason. He doesn't have a phone, obviously he's 7, but I want him to understand that this thing is in and of itself is not a bad thing. It's what you do with it that matters, right? And so these things
Yes.
can be incredibly valuable if applied and utilized the right way." And
Yeah.
he had my phone. He was doing something that was nondescript and innocuous, but he said, look, can I watch some shorts? And I'm like, well, what are you watching? And he goes, I've found this really good educational channel. I said, yeah, okay, well, tell me more. And he said, well, here, I'll show
Sure.
you. And he went to the channel and he showed me this channel, and it had like 90-second sound bites teaching things. And so he played one for me. And then we paused it and I said, okay, explain it to me. And he said, oh, I can't remember what it said. And I said, I'm
Yeah.
trying to make a point for you here, which is unless you and I talk about the thing and it slows down to the pace at which you actually learn, it won't work. So I said, here, let's do an
Yes.
experiment. We watched 5 of these shorts in a row, and then I had him explain what each one of them was, and then I played back to him what he explained. And 2 days later, I asked him about all 5 of them. He could remember 4 out of 5 from that experience, and it helped him to
Wow.
understand that the technology itself isn't part of it. You actually have to understand how to engage and
That's
learn
right.
through these things. And when we
Yeah.
think about STEM, because this stuff is moving so fast and we've reduced everything down to, shorts, is there
Mhm.
a part of the approach to learning that is actually about slowing down or understanding how you actually learn and develop skills, not just the technology knowledge, if that makes sense?
Yeah, what you did is what we focus on in teaching our facilitators on how to be good facilitators of the STEM learning. And that is not solving, but asking questions by slowing down and saying, okay, let's think about how you'd apply what you just learned. Because true learning comes from not only asking questions and understanding it, but also application, right? Because kids get excited when they see, oh, that could be used for this reason. Or I learned this thing and that applies to my life in this way, right? Because learning it for learning its sake, none of us remember anything, right? I mean, maybe in a week you ask him those 4 things again and he might be like, I don't remember any of them. you know, but if he connected it to something in his life, be connected to something in something that he cares about, right, in his community or in his home or in something that he's passionate about, whether he's into trains or he's into planes, or if he's into whatever he's into, being a firefighter, whatever they're into, right, that that connection is where learning really occurs. So what you're talking about is not just the STEM learning, the shorts, the videos, the technology, but it's teaching the adults in the room, the mentors in the room, or even peer-to-peer learning on how to ask questions to deepen the learning, how to ask questions, how to make connections, and how to apply it to real world problems or uh, issues or things that are in your life that matter to you. So that's when real learning occurs. And so, at SmartLab, we work really hard to make sure we train our facilitators that way. So we're an organization that doesn't just like sell you a bunch of stuff that you get to put in your classroom. We do sell you cool stuff. We curate the best top of the line stuff, but that's actually that's like half of the ingredients. The biggest piece of the ingredient is teaching the facilitator not just when to use these things and how to use these things, but how to ask good questions, how to really make those connections for the learner. And you gave a great example of that. And I think that if we just sit our kids in front of videos, or we just sit our kids in front of a bunch of technology and hope that they're going to learn, they're going to either stumble into things that they shouldn't be watching, or it's going to be fleeting, because they're so short, they're so fast that it's not settling into the brain in a way that's forming those connections that are long lasting, right? And so what you did by slowing down, asking questions, really helping him think through what he saw, what he didn't, how it applies, how it doesn't, and then asking him a week later, do you remember what you learned? That's where the deep learning occurs. And that's really the magic, I think, of STEM learning. It isn't the stuff. It's the
It's not the stuff.
facilitator mentoring and guiding the student through the learning process.
And almost the loop, if, as you said, like if I think about literally what my son's doing right now, because I'm distracting him for an hour.
Yes.
He started on playing Minecraft on a single console, and I was happy with it because it involved building, it involved creativity. But he very quickly worked out that it was limiting, because the whole point of Minecraft is all of the mods and the ability to go and do things that you choose to do with things that other people have brought into the game.
Hmm.
And for the first 2 weeks, I had to spend an entire amount of time understanding how to buy a new laptop and, secondhand laptop for $100, I think it was, install this thing
Sure.
and then install all the mods. And it was an absolute nightmare, even for someone in IT. But he's now at a point where he will go and research a mod on YouTube that he sees someone talking about, install the mod himself as a 7-year-old,
Hmm.
which is fairly straightforward, but still has to work out how to do it. And
Yeah.
then open Minecraft, then go back to the tutorial, watch the tutorial of how to build the thing with the mod, and then go back and execute. And he's kind of created a loop of discovery, learning, application, and then just repeat, rinse, and repeat.
Hmm.
I guess where I'm going with this is I want to understand how and what it looks like inside of a smart lab. Like what's actually happening in their day to day. Like if students are in there for an hour or 4 hours, or they come in whenever they want, they come after school. What are they doing? How is it structured or not?
Yeah, yeah. So it really depends on the school district and how they're using it. So many school districts have a lab. So they'll put a smart lab in an actual room that you can lock the door. In that room has everything from furniture that's customized for their hands-on project-based learning environment that they're looking for. It has all the kits and equipment in there that they can use to actually learn. It has curriculum that we've curated that's all lined up to state standards and all of the expectations that the school district has. It has training for that facilitator, so that facilitator knows how to go through the curriculum. And then it has support from us and support from the community. So we help curate turnkey ways for the community to come in and partner, mentor, and be a part of the student's experience. So that's what we call it, an integrated ecosystem. So all of this exists. What students go through is one of two things. They either go through units, and this is based on what the school needs and wants, right? They go through units where there's very specific units. So they might start off with like a shadows and motion unit, right? And they're learning about shadows and motion. And then they get to use a 3D pen to build a structure and then put it outside in the sun to see if it blocks off, and creates a shadow on wherever they're trying to create a shadow of. And then we connect that to real world where we say, hey, do you know that architects think about this, or city planners think about this when they're building a city or when they're building a stadium? Where does the away team sit versus the home team? Right? You want the away team in the sun, you want the home team in the shade. So how would you take this 3D pen and build something so that the away team is sitting in the hot sun, right? And they're like, oh, that's a job. That's a job. Oh, this is cool, right? And they get excited. And then when they go to the stadium with their dad or their mom, they're looking around and going, oh, I wonder if the architect thought about this when he was building this stadium, right? So that's an example of a unit. They're learning about shadows and motion. They're getting to use a STEM application, and then they're connecting it to a real world. So they go through maybe an hour a week of learning shadows and motion for maybe 3 weeks. And then at the end of 3 weeks, they have like a challenge at the end that they need to solve for. So that might be an example of a unit based. We also call what we call project starters. So project starters are these challenges that we give a student, and they can go and use any STEM application that might be in the room to solve that problem. So there might be a series of applications that are sitting in the room for them to play with. But the problem is a very specific problem that they're trying to solve. And then they go, okay, so for example, we might say, build a self-driving car to take food from the farm to the store, right? And your challenge is to get the food from the farm to the store. Go. And they have to think like, okay, am I going to code something on the ground? Am I going to build a robot to do that? Am I going to use a 3D pen to build something and then build a robot to do that? Am I going to fly it there? Like they then get to think about how they're going to get the food from the farm to the store. And now they're thinking about the fact that, oh, food doesn't just show up in my refrigerator. There's actually a way in which it got there. And I now have the ability to code something to get it there. Right. And so they get to learn. And that's more of a project starter model that's a little bit different than the like units that we're teaching. So one version could be in this room where the students come in once a week or twice a week to get these extra learning modules done outside of their basic day-to-day reading, writing, math, right, history lessons. Other ways that we do that are incorporated into their classroom. So many teachers now are thinking about, oh, I have a unit. I'm teaching them currency. I'm teaching them something in my unit that I need them to learn. What if I brought a STEM application into that unit to reinforce the unit on a deeper level? So in many cases, in many of our smart labs, even though they might not have a lab, they have a wall full of stuff in the library or in a storage unit that the teachers know that when they're teaching something in the classroom and they need it to be reinforced and they want to use a STEM application to do that, we have curriculum that's set up for them that they can use and plug and play that curriculum into their unit, or they themselves can get creative, go to the wall, get some STEM applications and pull it into their classroom. So we create really flexible learning environments for students and for school districts, whether they want a tried and true lab environment or they want to pull it into their classroom. I have a school here in San Diego that has what they call a wheel program, and the students go through like an hour of Spanish a week. They do an art session a week. They go into the garden. They do gardening once a week. They have music once a week, right? They have all these extracurricular things that they rotate through during certain hours of the day. And we've installed now a SmartLab into their school district. So now the students actually once a week also go to and do a SmartLab unit. And in fact, today, Wednesday, is the day where all the kids do their SmartLab unit. And so I always ask my daughter it happens to be my daughter's school, when she comes home from school, I'm always like, what did you learn today? Right. And that's the age old question. And they go, oh, I don't remember. But now I get to say, when you were in the Smart Lab, what application did you use and how did that connect to a career? And that's always much more fun. It's a much more interesting conversation than what did you learn today in school?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's going to kind of be one of my follow-on questions, which was, I mean, you talked right up front about, you still teach tools that still need to teach the basics, how to read, how to write,
Yes.
mathematics, history, English, the like. At some point, that becomes self-learning. Like, as I said, we're using the example of our children all through this talk, but my son's now at a point where he can grapple with most books. Like, he won't get every word, but he will know how to pull it together and know, I don't know how to say that word. And he's at the point where he can start to look up at something in a dictionary if he doesn't know it and find it out and have a crack at the pronunciation. My question, though, is once a child gets to a baseline of learning, in your view, how much of the curriculum should be this type of learning given the world we're going into and even the world we live in today?
Yeah, I
Like,
mean,
how much should it be
my personal opinion is it's
6
all of
hours a
it.
day in SmartLab?
I think,
All of
and
it,
I don't
right.
know if it has to be in SmartLab, but I do think that teachers should be pulling STEM applications into all of the learning that they're teaching. And I don't mean sit the student in front of a computer to learn. That's not what I mean. I mean lots of STEM applications, right? So AI we talked about, but there's also circuitry and electronics, right? There's communication and multimedia. That's a STEM application. Data collection and analysis. I use that every day as a CEO of a company. Data collection and analysis, people don't realize, is an actual STEM application that you use in your life, right? Information technology, right? Mechanics and structures, modeling and design, right? Robotics and control technology. There's so many things that are above and beyond just a computer, piece of technology that's helping you with something, right? And so I believe that it really should be embedded into all learning, because to your point of your watching your 7-year-old, my daughter has had an opportunity with reading. They've not officially diagnosed it, but somewhat diagnosed it as is what's called dysgraphia, which means when she knows what she wants to write, but when she gets to putting her hand to the paper to write out the story, she struggles and she forgets what she was going to say. And so we really were like, okay, well, she's got amazing stories. Her brain is like out of this world with imagination. And she tells these really cool stories. And so we thought, well, what if we did talk to text for her and see because she was starting to get really down on herself, like, oh, I'm a bad writer. I'm not as fast as my peers. My peers are spitting out 5 paragraphs. I can only get out 2, right? And she was starting to get really down on herself and would say the words like, I'm a bad writer. I can't write. I'm not a good writer. And I thought, that's not true. She's got the most amazing imagination, and the way in which she articulates a story and gives you visual feeling about whatever story she's telling you is fascinating, right? So we put this talk to text, and we just did this on the side because I refused to have my daughter believe she was a bad writer. I put this talk to text tool in front of her, and now she thinks she's the best writer since sliced bread. Like, she really loves writing because she's like, I'm able to get out my story quickly. The computer basically types it all up for me. And then I get to go back and do the process of editing, which is, of course, the learning part that the teacher wants her to do, right? Go back and edit. Is it capitalized? Is it a period? Is it the correct grammar? Do you have a comma before but? All the things that are really important for learning. But
Stuff that
it was
AI could easily do.
yeah, right. It was backwards for her though, right? She was learning how to do that first, and then it was preventing her from feeling like she was getting her ideas on paper, because it was a struggle for her. And now we're like, get your ideas on the paper so you have belief that you're a good writer, and then go back and edit, because we know. I mean, I got my doctorate and barely wrote because I could write it and then have the computer help me with grammar. you know and so in the real world, you don't necessarily have to be an excellent grammatically correct writer, but you do have to be a great storyteller, right? You do have to be able to evoke emotion when you're telling a story, right? Because storytelling has been around since the beginning of time, and that's how we connect as humans, right? AI technology will never be able to connect like we can connect with stories and evoke emotion in a way that you can only do from human to human. And so, you know, that's an example of how we use technology to support her learning instead of technology maybe doing the learning for her, right? And so that's a really I
Yeah,
think a
yeah,
differentiation
absolutely.
of like using technology to support and to help level the playing field for maybe somebody that has a neurodiversity or something that is more of an opportunity for them. And it's really fascinating to see how kids can thrive when they're given tools like that, and get that narrative out of their head that they're not good at something. They're not good at math. They're not good at reading. They're not good at writing. They're not good at whatever. Kids are not good at anything. They're amazing creatures that come out creative, come out inquisitive, come out ready for learning, right?
Positive.
And somehow we institutionally hold them down from that flourishing and being their best versions of themselves. And I think if we use technology to help support that, and that levels the playing field and can help students that might not otherwise thrive.
Yeah, and we've actually it leads me into a question that I've got around this kind of leveling the play field and upward mobility. Uh, like a lot of the time when we think about what technology has the capacity to do at a macro level, is that it has the ability to make something that was the domain of only a very small number of people who with a lot of money and a lot of resources and maybe time to do something, and then makes that broadly available to pretty much everyone at nominal or incremental cost. In how you think about SmartLab and the type of learning that you can bring into a school, how do you contrast that with the spread of schools that might themselves be marginalised or in lower demographic areas, and the way that might create upward mobility? Is this something that actually allows schools to level the playing field in some way, or only the most expensive of schools can get access to this type of capability for now? Or how's that curve evolving?
Yeah, so school districts obviously receive budgets and then make choices about what they value for how they spend their money. But so some school districts have more money, and some school districts have less money, right? And so that gives them limited ability to put in certain aspects, maybe a smart lab, maybe not a smart lab, maybe a reading program, maybe not a reading program, based on their limited budget. This is where I believe the community needs to be involved, right? We shouldn't just be reliant on the federal government and the community and the school district themselves to figure out how our children learn and what environments they need to be put in to thrive. We as a community need to wrap our arms around school districts, whether you're living in that school district or you're not living in that school district. And either that's, obviously through your taxes, that happens in the US, but I also believe that corporations, philanthropists, and community members need to come in to school districts, whether it's in their own community and or in other communities that maybe they would never even venture into, and help support those students to level the playing field. I have a great example. So that ribbon cutting that I did yesterday was sponsored by the Compost Foundation. The Compost Foundation is a foundation that is part of the compost company, right? So they take, I think, 1% to 2% of their profits and turn it into this foundation, and then give to various causes. And one of the causes they give to, in deep ways, is STEM. Well, that's their main focus, creating STEM learning for students, and they do it in various different ways. They knocked on our door one day and said, "We want to help underserved communities get access to STEM learning." That was their mission. And so we partnered with them and found schools across the country, and they've done multiple schools with us. We found schools all over the country that are in under-resourced communities where the budgets are not at a place where they could afford to put a smart lab in. And we said, great. We called these schools and said, and the school I was up in Oakland, it's Urban Promise in Oakland. We called them and said, we have a funder that is willing to pay for your students to get this smart lab and get exposure to this STEM identity. And of course, they did not say no. They said, absolutely, you have a company that's willing to pay for a smart lab in our school. We will own getting the facilitator. And then I said, we'll own training your facilitator, and then we'll own getting you all of the kits and equipment and the furniture and turn your room into this amazing learning environment. And it was an amazing partnership between a community foundation, Smart Lab, and the school district and the school itself. And so Oakland Unified has this Urban Promise school that now gets this amazing smart lab for their students, which they would never otherwise been able to afford. And so I believe that it's really about the community coming and saying, listen, we need to make sure we put our dollars in so that all students across the country get access to this. Because you and I are going to make sure our students get, our son, your son, my daughter are going to get what they need to get a leg up in this world. And all parents want that for their kids, but they don't necessarily have the income. They don't necessarily have the means, and they might not even have the know-how on how to get their student to that level. And so, and then the school district itself does not have enough resources to handle that alone. So I really believe that's where the community, philanthropists, and folk and companies that could take a little bit of their profits and put in smart labs into school districts across the country so that all students, whether you're in a high economic resource community or a low economic resource community, can get access to this kind of learning. So that's a great example. The Compost Foundation, we're so proud to be their partner because they are, they put 2-3 labs in under-resourced communities across the country every year, which is pretty fabulous.
Wow. That is amazing. And look, and
we want more. We want more companies to come to the table.
More.
Yeah, we want more. We want more companies.
I mean, there's like 9,000 schools, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, there's, and we, in the U.S., we've got the public school system, we have the charter school system, we have the private school system, we have micro school systems, we have so many choices, and we need, businesses, corporations to put a small percentage of their profits into giving these kind of learning environments. And really, it's worth it, right? 80% of hiring managers, there was a study done by the U.S., the College Board here in the U.S., and they said 80% of hiring managers say that high school graduates are less prepared now than in past decades. That's like mind-boggling to me. And this is in the US, right? 80% of hiring managers are saying they're less prepared. 69% of HR professionals say they face widening gaps in the workforce readiness, especially in analytics and tech skills. How is that possible? The technology is coming out of everybody's ears, and yet 69% of HR professionals are saying there's widening gaps of the workforce readiness, specifically in analytics and tech skills. That to me is mind-numbing. That means all students. I mean, this is a workforce problem, right? So if businesses aren't willing to put 5%, 1% into ensuring that students are getting STEM learning environments, that's going to be a ripple effect that their workforce on the other end of that is not diverse, is not ready, and is not able to handle the type of work that they need, the type of workers that they're going to need for the future. So people are really scared about AI taking jobs, but humans still need to exist. humans still need to function and help us get to the next level in most of these corporations, right? And so we humans aren't going anywhere, at least not in my generation. I don't know, maybe one day they'll go, maybe it will be run by robots, but right now humans need to exist. And you and I want to set up our kids for a really equitable world. And I believe that businesses, corporations, philanthropists need to really think about, hey, if I need to spend $1 or if I want to give $1, I should probably give it to students to get level that playing field, that all students are ready for the workforce of the future.
It's funny, like you said just before, like, there's no problem with learning the technology. We're awash with the technology. It's connecting the usage of the technology and the understanding of it to solving real world problems, either for
Yeah,
humans or for society generally, is actually where the gap comes in. So I
that's right.
totally agree with it.
Well,
I
and
kind of
there's
wanted to
many
understand.
students, there's
Yeah,
many students that aren't exposed to technology. You're actively exposing your son to technology. I'm actively exposing my daughter to technology. There's many parents that are working two jobs, barely able to put food on their table. They don't have time to think about, okay, now let me make sure I also put some STEM application, or make sure they're having the conversation that you had with your son about, like, let's look at those 5 topics that you just learned and see which ones you remember, and then let's connect it to a real. They don't have time to do that. They're working 3 jobs,
right. Yeah.
so I really think that we have to remember that, like, not everybody is as entitled and fortunate as maybe you and I have been in our careers, and that we need to really say to ourselves, how do we make sure we level the playing field and not just connect it to real world problems, but expose kids, right? When I watched that student out there with that drone, he would never have otherwise been able to play with a drone in that school, in that community. I mean, I walked
In
to
that
that
context as
school.
well.
Yeah, I walked to that school and there's trash everywhere. I mean, these students are walking to their school and in an environment that is not clean, not safe, and they're very safe behind those 4 walls, very safe. And the educators in that school district love and care and are supporting them, and that whole school district is trying everything they can. But there's limited resources, right? And so this is where that exposure to these tech applications is really, really important, and then connecting it to real world problems and their and things that they can solve within their own community, so that they can keep it in their community and thrive and continue to flourish in their own community, I think is really, really important.
Yeah, and like if I connect it to like the longer arc of history, and I think Ray Dalio talks a bit about this idea that if you see an emerging and growing society in kind of the ebbs and flows of empires and organizations, a lot of it starts with a highly educated workforce, right? And you can talk
Yeah.
about Korea emerging after the Korean War and what happened in the US post World
Yes.
War II, and
Yes.
certainly in China since the start of 2000s. And the question I would ask is, if you wanted a highly educated workforce 5 or 10, 20 years from now, what would you need to be educating them? And yes, you need to
Mhm.
educate them on the basics, but you probably need to educate them on how to connect technology to real world problems and real world
Yes.
challenges. And that's, as you said, it's a collaboration problem, it's a empathy problem, it's a communication challenge. So it's the right type of thing to be teaching them. So
Yeah.
super fascinating. I've got one final question because I always get to an hour super quick, which is always my
I
worry.
know we could talk forever.
Um, I've got so many more questions. But my question that I ask everyone now, because it's taken me 5 years to work out a great closing question. I want to understand your least favorite and your favorite part of working on this challenge.
Hmm. Yeah, I love this question. So good job spending 5 years crafting it. I think my least favorite part of this problem that we're trying to solve is that I know that it's not equitable across all schools. All students are not getting this type of exposure. And so I feel like I'm screaming and fighting to ensure that all students get this kind of learning, and exposure to STEM applications that connect to real world problems. I We've defined STEM identity as, and I mentioned it earlier, but a learner's self belief that I belong, I can master rigorous challenges, and my ideas have impact. Because when you believe that, you're going to be successful in whatever you do. whether you're flipping burgers at McDonald's or you're working in some high tech company, right? If you believe you belong, you're going to be the manager of the McDonald's, or you're going to be, right, the CEO of that tech company, because you believe that you belong. You believe you can master anything. You believe your ideas have impact. So I think the thing that I just feel like so passionate about is that every student deserves this. Every kid, when they come out of the womb, needs the ability to get and earn their STEM identity, feel like they belong, feel like they can master rigorous challenges, feel like their ideas have impact, because that's what's going to generate a society that is unified and collaborative and not at odds with each other and not fear-based and unified, because we'll be curious, we'll listen, we'll collaborate, and we'll grow together as a society. So that question is so powerful to me, because it's frustrating when I feel like I'm constantly have to remind people that it can't just be this group of people that get this. It has to be also this group of people that get this. And so that can be really exhausting as a leader, because I'm so passionate about this, because I feel like this is the future, and we cannot do this without all kids, right? Because it's not just some. If we just have some, then we all fail. Right. And then we find ourselves into some of the problems that we have today in society, right? I won't get into that. But like, if only the few get the exposure to things, we continually just push down, push down, push down, and we all don't rise together. So that would be the piece that I feel that is the hardest for me in this kind of piece. And then the favorite part is probably the same thing. My favorite part is when I have those moments where we get students that wouldn't otherwise get exposed to this, get them exposed, right? When I meet a Compost Foundation, Marco Compost and Deanna Compost, shout out to both of them. They are leaders that see that it matters to get all students. They were very fortunate in their life to build an amazing company, and to see that they are saying, I want to spend some of our hard-earned profit and give back to kids that are in under-resourced communities and make sure they get the exposure. That's my favorite part. When there's people that I'm like-minded with, and we're in it, and we're like, let's see that beautiful student that was out there yesterday flying that drone and being able to communicate how a job could be for him at 13 years old. That was really powerful. So that's my favorite part. And it's sort of like the same answer coming at it from two different ways, but I get really excited when I have like-minded people that this with me. Yeah.
It's funny when you were saying the thing that was frustrating, all I could think was, I bet the opposite side of that coin is the uplifting part. It's both the source of tension and frustration, and release and joy and ecstasy from solving the same underlying fundamental challenge.
Yes, I love that. That's the joy of life, right? If we're not here to actually make a difference, and we don't get joy from being a small pebble in making a difference, then what is life about?
Absolutely. Wonderful closing words. Dr. Berry, thank you so much for coming on the show. And I'm really excited to see them. When I get to San Diego, which I will do because my best friend in America is in San Diego, I really want to come out and check out one of the labs.
Absolutely. You come. And anytime you're in the US, you come check out a lab. And if anybody in Australia needs a lab, let us know. We'll come there too.
We'll make it happen.
Yeah,
Thanks
excellent.
again.
Thank you. Talk to you soon.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Shape the System. As usual, if you'd like to suggest a guest, someone that you know who's helped change a system for the better, please go to www.shapethesystem.org, click on the top right-hand corner, then click Suggest Guest. Make sure that you click subscribe so that you get the new episode. Shape the System is an independent podcast with support from KPMG High Growth Ventures. Connects founders to the services they need along their journey. Whether you are looking to refine your strategy, mature your finance function, prepare for a capital raise, expand abroad, or simply comply with regulatory requirements, they provide you with the support you need to drive your business forward.